So I asked Kirby right after the Kentucky game in that disastrous press conference situation that we had at Kentucky, if he was concerned about the penalties. And here's his response to me. He said, I watched games today and it was like crazy. We're higher than we've ever been. And I think he means, it's true about Georgia, but I think he's talking about nationally. He said, I watch all these games. They're higher than they've ever been. And I'm like, what's going on? We have been a low penalty smart team, and I can't figure it out. I don't know if it's the way it's being called. Is it being called tighter? Because everybody's got more, but we certainly got to reel it in. Talking about the penalties. Now, here are the numbers, which I think are pretty disturbing, and I'll put them in context in a second here. Georgia's foes, so that's Clemson, Kentucky, and Tennessee Tech, have combined to have 89 yards total of penalties in 3 games. Georgia has an in-season record for the time that Kirby's been there of 240 total penalty yards. And before we start talking about the non-penalty that was against Jalen Walker, it's all relative. I mean, like officials miss calls and so forth, but the fact is that is the largest in-game 3-game total, in-season 3-game total that Georgia's had. The start of the 2020 season, coupled with the Baylor Sugar Bowl, was a longer 3-game run. Was a worse 3-game run, narrowly. It was the I misspoke a second ago. It was the I said it right. The Baylor game in 2019 coupled with the Arkansas and Auburn games of 2020, so 2 different seasons. Those had 9 more yards in 3 games and penalties. But Georgia, at the end of the day, has got to get better. I mean, it really is problematic because one other thing that Kirby was talking about, not my question. I can't remember who. Half the time I can't remember who asks the questions, but there were a lot of times the other day when at Kentucky, when the drive was over and it was extended by a penalty. I should have looked that up before I came on here. I did not, because I'm quite clearly negligent at my job. But Georgia's 119th right now in penalties. Like, that's bad. They are not the only undefeated team that is there, but everybody else has got a loss except Liberty. Georgia, you don't want to be on the list down. That's bad. And yards per game, Georgia's at 80 yards per game, which is also pretty rough in the grand scheme of things. Tied with Vanderbilt with that many yards per game. So it's something they're going to have to get right. Now, there's always explanations for it. Georgia's played 1 road game out of 3. When Alabama's played a road game. I think in Texas, Alabama, they played road games. LSU, they played road games. So some of it is that Georgia's only played, but most teams have played. Most teams, not everybody, have played more than 1 home game. That's one explanation why you'd have more penalties, because you're not playing at home. LSU, Georgia, they played a neutral and an away and a home. So like LSU would be a good example to test this theory with. I'll say this: I wouldn't want it, but by the end of the season, you don't want to be compared with LSU in terms of discipline. Like they don't have it. It doesn't seem like, for sure. But even LSU, they're going at about 72 yards a game. It's just too much. But Kirby, I don't know if he's right about that. I'm taking him at his word that he does when he says, I think everybody in the country is concerned about penalties. That was his first sentence to me. And because I have a database of numbers that I keep that I feel like are important numbers, and it dates back to 2010. So I've got all of Kirby's games. And I've got some of, about half of Mark Richt's years in there too. And like 50 yards in penalties, that's sometimes it's like playing the game. But once you get past 70, like Georgia before this season, the last time they had 70 yards or more in penalties in a game, unless this data that I've collected is incorrect, was the Georgia Tech game in 2022. So like they're way up in penalties. It's a lot, and it's not it's not abnormal for other teams to have over 50 against Georgia. I mean, you had TCU had it in the national championship game. Tennessee, Martin, South Carolina. Those are the 2023 games. Kentucky had 60 last year against the Dogs. Ole Miss 68. But since that Ole Miss game, I mean, Georgia's opponents have not been over 50 with the exception of Tennessee Tech. That's it. So I do think if it's not cleaned up, it's problematic. It's problematic. In basketball, you don't want more than, I mean, like, if you got more than 10, 12, if you got more than 12 turnovers, something's going on wrong. Right now, Georgia, I mean, is playing exceptionally well, I would say, defensively. But I would say they played pretty well offensively. But that, whenever you play a game like they just did, or a season ago like they did against at Auburn, particularly, but I would say the Vanderbilt game as well on the road. Those games give you real pause about what do we really know about this team. And my take on this team was they were going to be explosive offensively and they were going to have trouble on the defensive line. Well, both of those have been wrong. I mean, the defensive line has played great. Has way overperformed what I thought it would be. The offense has not played as well as I thought it would be in terms of explosion. I mean, explosion's there, but like when you play as bad as they did offensively against Kentucky, then you have to reconsider you can't really say Georgia has been explosive offensively because they haven't. In that game, they were not explosive at all. Now, in the other games, they had 9 20-plus yard plays against Clemson. That's explosion. But when it's like a boxing match. Whenever we got to the end of the boxing match, there's more data. We know more about things, and right now Georgia's came off a really poor bout, and they did not play well offensively. Defensively, I mean, these guys are legit, man. They're really playing well. They're allowing about 200 yards a game. That's crazy. I mean, that's not going to continue, first of all, but that shows how strong they are. 200 yards a game, 6 points a game, and they've not allowed a touchdown. That Kentucky's offense is not great. I would argue they're probably just not good either. Like, they're not a good team in terms of that. Defensively, Kentucky's pretty good defensively, as it turns out. I mean, like what they did to South Carolina last week, they're a top 10 defense in just straight up, total defense. They are a top 10 rushing defense. They're only allowing 62 yards a game. They're only allowing 14.7 points a game, so they hit their average with Georgia. It's very rare that Mike Bobo led Georgia teams are below the average of the other team. I mean, way often, Georgia's offenses have outperformed the other team's defensive average, but not the Kentucky game at all. But the Cats are very sticky against in the run game defensively, and so there are things to work on in a big way at Georgia. I mean, but the penalties just plain kill you sometimes, and they didn't kill Georgia I almost said last night, Saturday night. When we have these away night games, they really goof me up until about like Tuesday or Wednesday, because we lose. You're losing sleep because you're almost always having to drive away to a hotel. We didn't leave Commonwealth until I think we left at we were hoping to leave at 11:30, which was like a pipe dream. I think we left at 11 or at 1, but it was in that ballpark. So we were way later. So I get confused sometimes on Mondays and Tuesdays. Certainly Sundays are bad. But that, the penalties can really hurt you. And they kept a fair amount of Kentucky drives going, particularly in the third quarter. I think it was the third quarter. I'm going to look it up now. Now I've just got myself wrapped up into this. Give me 1 second. I want to pause this. Yeah, I mean, Kentucky had 4 first downs by a penalty. That's a lot. So 3 of those 4 were on third down plays. One was a 3rd and 1. I think the one was the 3rd and 1, one was 3rd and 6. I think the other one was 3rd and 4. So, That doesn't that's not what you want at all. That is a very challenging way to win a football game. The bizarre part about it is the way I read it is of the three, Kentucky didn't score on any of those drives. So Georgia sort of dodged a bullet in that sense, but then the other guys get to pursue going down the field. At the end of the day, that's just on the defensive side of the ball. At the end of the day, the penalties just got to come down. I mean, Georgia's an extremely disciplined team. You see that they did not have a great Georgia's discipline. It wasn't great Saturday night when you talk about the penalties. A season high, 85 yards in penalties. The discipline as it relates to the coaching staff at the end of the game, they messed up the clock. Kirby admitted it after the game. I didn't know quite how to ask that question, but he answered it with me saying it in a goofy way, which was they didn't do a great job of managing the clock. In his defense, I think the officials did a really bad job of game management there. That was bad to me. But I thought they were pretty poor in terms of administrative stuff the entire day. So nonetheless, I could see where Kirby and them get confused. Carson, let me just read it because I don't want to put words in his mouth about what, was said. He started talking about, in terms of the clock. Here's the real quote. He said, talking about the officials, they didn't tell us they took the timeout away during a review. He said, so we had a mishap in that we went up there, the offense, and snapped the ball thinking that there had been a timeout so the clock would be stopped, which would make sense. There's no point to sit up there on the line if the if a timeout's been called. You wouldn't want the guys to stand up there. You get a penalty for, it's like somebody flinches or something. You just run up to the line, do it a normal way. That's not what happened. The clock was running, and Carson, because there had, unbeknownst to Georgia and certainly Carson Beck, the clock was running. He wouldn't have gotten up there and snapped it with 12 seconds left. Well, he did. So anyway, Kirby goes on to say, so Carson snapped the ball with 10 to 12 seconds. That would have been off the clock, which was a huge mistake. He said, it just infuriates me that we did it, but it happened, and it was a little bit of a communication error because we assumed it was a timeout. But let me say this real quick. And someone from Georgia can just call me or email me if they got an issue with what I'm about to say. But he can't criticize the officials without a bunch of criticism from the league, I think, in a penalty, monetary penalty. And it looks bad. But I'm just going to tell you right now, what he's saying is, without saying it, they didn't inform us. The officials did not inform us that they were taking away the timeout. Now, Ryan Curley said they heard it very clearly. The timeout was not charged. And I think I remember that too. But I think you, as an official, I would imagine you want to go over and directly tell the head coach, hey, that was not a timeout. That's what it is. I don't know what happened in that scenario, but it seems clear Georgia was not aware the way they would want to be, that the timeout was rescinded and that the clock was rolling. Because at the end of the day, remember, when Georgia punted, Kentucky had the ball, I believe, with 9 seconds left. All that took forever to figure out. Again, the administration of the officials was horrific on Saturday night. The game would have been over as soon as he punted the ball into the air. So that's the difference there, is that Kentucky wouldn't have even had the ball. And in addition to that, I think it's possible, I would need to go back and look, I think it's possible that after that first down, if I'm not getting confused, Georgia would not have had the ability, it wouldn't have had to even punt. So as I look at this, Georgia had to punt with about 8 seconds or so left on the clock. And of course, Kentucky got the ball with 9 seconds left. So probably the game would have ended with the punt. And all said and done, what should have happened. Georgia won the game, and all this other stuff didn't make any difference. But it's both of those things. Little stuff can add up against you. Penalties are not a little thing. They can be big in the moment, or they can be little things that add up, right? A lot of stuff that Georgia's usually really good at, they didn't do so hot on Saturday night. And I'll say this too, just since I'm continuing to talk about that game. It was really good, and I said this before the game, it was really good that they have the ability to go away, be down, which they were for 3/4 and a little bit of that game, and face the problems that they're going to face on the road. Because remember, The next 3 games that they play on the road are Bama, Texas, Ole Miss. They may not be favored in all those games now. We'll just see. But it's going to be a toss-up with Bama and Texas for sure. The offensive line, from what I saw on the screen through the camera lens, they were not all popping off at the same time when the clap happened, because you couldn't hear the clap as well. Just telling you what it was. So that's what it is playing on the road. Like, communications are a problem. I never saw Carson do this. I've not seen that lately in college football. So the crowd noise in terms of communication from headset to headset, it's not really an issue. But the offensive line did not have a good night Saturday night. I need to still watch everything again, but I can just tell you the get off was not the same. That's common on road games, which is why it's difficult to play on the road. Which is why if you can get it going a little bit, it silences the crowd. It gives you the ability to, like on first and second down, it's not so bad. It felt like third down a lot the other night. And that was a problem. I will add this too, just knowing it off the top of my head. Kentucky converted a lot of third downs the other night. A lot. And they were 9 of 16. And that's not normal. That's not normal. That shows me 2 things. A, that you're running the ball effectively, which they did at 170 yards. 170 yards on 45 carries. Not a great average, but it's 170 yards. And then, in terms of, just having very short, manageable third down situations, I'd have to go back and look. But my guess is a lot of them were 3rd and 4s, certainly 3rd and 5s or below. 3 of the 9 conversions were by, penalty. So, if you take those away, 6 of 16, that's much more normal. But 9 of 16. Anyway, Georgia does have a lot to clean up, and that's up to Kirby and them to do it. They got a huge game against Alabama. Thanks for watching.